right, well, welcome to our 4th episode of Watershed Talks. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Pastor Joseph?
Well, I'm getting over a cold. You can probably hear it in my voice a little bit. I was joking around that maybe it'll actually make my voice sound better, like in that one episode of Friends from when Phoebe was sick. But enough about that. I am feeling better. I'm excited. We're closing on our house today, which I've never owned a home. So is
awesome.
The home you're in now your first one?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's such a different feeling when it's your place. I grew up, my wife and I, we always had the church homes, parsonages.
Right.
And so if you wanted to paint a wall, you had to talk to somebody, it's like, oh my gosh. Or if like the countertop was from like 1960,
right,
and it's like,
which we have that situation at home, at our new home. I actually also noticed that the carpet was much more stained than when it had all the furniture in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I did floors as a living in high school, so I'm like, can I knock these carpets out real quick, like
with nothing's in
just
there,
really fast? Can I do this before we move in? But anyway, so but we're excited. So how are you doing? What's going on in your life?
We're doing really well. We have homecoming this week, and so that's kind of the exciting thing about Spencer, Iowa right now.
Right.
And so homecoming, we have the football game on Friday, and then the dance afterward. I have to admit, like, it's my daughter's first high school dance.
Mine too.
Yeah. Oh,
she's going.
Really?
Yeah. Well, she's a sophomore, and the dresses that she was looking at, I was like, no way. But I think her and Mom worked it out. So, but yeah, it was like, you're a lady. Like, stop it.
I know.
But yeah, unfortunately, we're gonna miss the actual homecoming because we're volunteering at a dental clinic in Sioux City.
That's great.
Yeah. It's there's not many places in Spencer that, there may not be any at all that will accept if you don't have insurance. So if you're on Medicaid or any of those kinds of things. So this is a place somewhat nearby, hour and a half away, that you can go if you need any help with that. So.
And that's a great transition into the book of Ruth.
Okay.
Because when you think about it, Ruth and Naomi, they didn't have health insurance back then. They didn't have any sort of safety network, and that was what it was like during her time.
That's right.
You depended on the man to work for you, and you depended on your sons to provide for you. That was your Social Security.
Yeah. And they definitely didn't have that. So you're right. Good transition. So how do you want to dig into it today?
Well, so I want to start off by just a little story. All right. So whenever you go to the Spencer Hospital and you look at the TV, typically it's on the Hallmark Channel.
Okay.
And so
that's right.
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
And so when I'm watching the Hallmark Channel and I'm looking at the plot and whatnot, so I get into it when I'm there and there's other people in the room, and it's because I think it's hilarious because you know exactly where it's going. So what I want to do is I want to present the Book of Ruth as a Hallmark movie. Okay. So you got young Ruth, and everything's going well in her life, but then she has this horrible event where leaves her single. Okay. And so she's a hard worker. Now she's got to return home, or at least home with her mother-in-law, to this small town called Bethlehem.
Yes.
And it's a season of harvest. Usually a Hallmark movie, it's Christmas.
Right.
But they don't have Christmas at this time, no Jesus yet. So it's a season of harvest. And so when they get there, she is working in the field, and she's sweaty and she's hot. And then there's this guy who kind of takes notice of her, and his name is Boaz.
Mm-hmm.
And so things are kind of getting heated up a little bit with Boaz, and you think that this is going to happen, but then Boaz is like, wait, there's another guy.
Oh,
and you need to go, we need to check out and see if this other guy wants you as a wife.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of left hanging for a while, and then you realize, oh, no, he doesn't want her, and then finally there's that resolution in the end.
Yeah, I left that out completely in my sermon this week, but yeah, you're right about that. Yeah. So I can kind of see it. I can see the Hallmark movie there. So we need to let's put in some money. Let's make this happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a romantic book, and I think when you look at movies that are rom-coms or things like that, there is a definite flow to it, and so when we look at this book, I mean, it's a love story
Yeah,
in a
for
lot of
sure.
ways.
Definitely. So I think what we've been doing is just kind of digging into the sermon. So do you want to? We can open up with the text for a minute.
Yeah. So it was Ruth chapter 1, and then we went up to about Ruth. Let's see here. I think it was Ruth 15 that we stopped at.
I think with this week it was 1:16 was the only verse out of 1.
Okay.
The classic one. You want to hit us with that real quick?
Yeah. So Ruth 1:16, but Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God."
I mean, I had a class once where the professor did an interesting job of showing us the most popular verses out of any book. I mean, I would think this one just about has to be the Ruth one, right?
Yeah. Funny enough, I thought the same thing. And so when I was going over this, I just kind of Googled top verses in the Bible.
Oh, you did? Okay.
This didn't come up in the top 10.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh. I mean, do you remember which one did? Because, I mean, I can't think of another one that sticks out more in my mind.
Yeah. It's John 3:16. That's, yeah.
Yeah. No, I meant just out of Ruth.
Oh.
Out of Ruth's top verses.
No, yeah.
I think this would have
This
to
would be the top for
yeah,
Ruth.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about this verse that resonates? Whether or not we can prove that it's the top verse or not. In our life, we know this one is we hear this when we know we're in Ruth, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think it is about this verse that resonates so strongly?
So here we have Ruth basically showing her true character, and it's loyalty. And so here's this woman who has lost everything, Ruth's mother-in-law, and Ruth is saying, okay, we're in it together. And Ruth knows it's a hopeless situation. And there are other things that go a little bit deeper when you know what she's actually doing. So when she says, wherever you go, I'll go, that means that she's no longer going to be a Moabite. She's going to go into the land of Israel, and then your God will be my God. So she's changing in Kamash. Is that how you say it? The God of the Moabites.
Oh, yeah.
And going over to the God of the Israelites. And so she's basically, it's a huge identity shift, and it's walking away from one part of your life and walking into a new part. And so
maybe we should give that background just for a second.
Yeah.
Sometimes we kind of assume, but just again, Ruth is a Moabite, which is a different nation. The only reason that she knows Naomi is Naomi's family came to Moab to live due to some trends and forces of what was going on back home. Naomi's son marries Ruth. Her other sons marry some other Moabite women. I'm not sure where this fits in with the whole ban on intermarriage with foreign cultures.
They were not following the law.
Probably, I guess they probably weren't. I know there's a time in Israelites' history where that law is relaxed, but this would definitely still be where they weren't supposed to do that. But
and I mean they weren't following the law, but they were following kind of the ethos, the spirit of the time, and it's put in the time of Judges, and it says
right.
In that time the Israelites had no king, and everybody did as they saw fit.
Yeah, which is maybe for a different podcast, but the whole idea of doing as you see right is, we've been talking about spectacles and having the good spectacles and the sort of flesh or worldly ones, and how much danger is there in doing as you think is right or you see as right? But nonetheless, God works with us where we're at, and so we have a family that started, a mixed family, but nonetheless a family. Seems like there's a lot of love there. Unfortunately, the sons pass away, leaving Naomi with Ruth and Orpha as daughter-in-laws. And of course, at this time, even to today, but especially at this time, to be a widowed family that has no men at all, just a family of widows, really.
Yeah.
All three of them. The idea of them sticking together and they're gonna make it through life, the three of them, is pretty crazy.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it is.
I mean, the what Naomi tells Ruth to do, in before the verse that we just read, is to go and find another husband in Moab.
Mhm.
I mean, that just is what makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I hate to put it this way, but it's almost like go get a job.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you do not need to come back with me. I don't know what the future holds. I'm gonna go back home, but I mean, you know, even more so, not only are you going to be a widow there, you're going to be a foreigner there once we're back home. Like it makes, I mean, right?
It does. Yeah. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense why Ruth did it
at all. And yet, and you know, and yet something in her. I mean, why do you think she stuck with Naomi? What this verse that you just read? Why was this her response?
Well, and I think that's why it captures our hearts, and it's like, why? Why would she? I mean, again, I think it goes back to integrity, to character, to loyalty. But that's my thought. How about you?
Well, I would say yes to that, but for me, those are outward evidences of something deeper. I think she just felt the call. I think she just felt. Okay, there's a whole debate on whether the Holy Spirit was around back then or not, but I think she just felt something in her inner compass. It was pointing, you know, due north was Naomi.
Yeah.
And she just listened to that. And I do think that speaks to her integrity and her you know, her having a certain kind of character. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'm just guessing here, but I just feel that something in her said, go this way. I mean, have you had times in your life where you had two or three paths in front of you and all of the logic and reason in the world couldn't tell you which one? Have you ever been like that?
Yeah. And actually, it's kind of the story of how we came to Spencer, Iowa. And so one of the things that I told my wife when I started ministry, I'm like, we're never going to go far west. We're definitely not going to go northwest in Iowa. And so a few years back, the Spencer Church came open. And, you know, I was along with some other churches, and my wife and I were talking, we were driving, and I said, well, you know, there's this church over here. And she's like, no, not at all, you know.
And where were you at?
Bloomfield, Iowa. So really, really southeast.
Okay.
And so kind of like Missouri. So interesting place.
Okay.
And a good place
Gotcha.
to raise kids up. And so my wife was like, there's no way. And then I was like, well, just think on it, pray on it. And then, you know, the next day I was like, what do you think? And she's like, you know, I feel like we're called here. And
to Spencer.
Interesting. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And about how many years ago was this?
That was about 3.5 years ago.
Okay. So kind of almost the same time frame for us.
Oh, yeah.
Close to it.
Yeah. So how did you feel that call to come?
So I was serving two Methodist churches in Texas. I went back. I was one of those sort of later in life college graduates. So I went back to get my bachelor's in Austin, hook 'em horns, and was serving in a part-time capacity, but it was 3 different part-time jobs for 2 different Methodist churches in the area. Due to certain things going on in the Methodist Church, the initial plan had been to fold all of my part-time stuff into a full-time ministry position. I had surrendered to full-time pastoral ministry in 2018, and I was graduating in 2020. So, you know, we had time to see this coming. But unfortunately, due to some of the stuff going on in the Methodist Church, they realized that they were going to be losing a lot of members, and they could not find a way to make it a full-time position. So just began to pray. I ended up interviewing all over the nation, and I had this vision for a whole family ministry where you were not just ministering to youth or kids, but mom and dad too.
Yeah.
And in the title of the job description, it said youth and family ministries at the church that I was at before.
Mhm.
And that was the only reason I even submitted my application, because it had that word family in it. And, I interviewed other places, but we came and visited here in the summer of 2020. And actually, as we drove away, my wife was the first one, because we drove up and then we drove back because we're crazy like that. As we were literally on 71 and we had just passed Holiday Inn and Maynard's, she was the first one to say, like, we're supposed to come here. And, that I was like, I felt it in my heart, but to hear her vocalize it, it just really, it moved us. And so we came in August of 2020. So
isn't that interesting? It was both the women,
the wives. And hey, our story today is about the woman, about Ruth. But so anyways, all of this to say, sometimes what's reasonable, what's logical, by the world standards is just not what we're supposed to listen to. When in general, yes, but every now and then we have, would you agree we have that spirit's call or pull, maybe tug?
And even if you aren't a person of faith, there's still something within you that kind of, it can pull you. And a Christian would say that that's the Holy Spirit working and pulling you in God's direction. But yeah, there are definitely times where you have this feeling, this gut feeling, like this is what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think I believe you're right with Ruth. That's what she was feeling at that time.
I'm reading into it a bit. I'm doing a little bit of Pastor Joseph's version here, but I do feel strongly that she just. I think of like Rahab. What Rahab did was a sin. She lied, but it wasn't, because she knew somehow this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to take care of these men that have come. And if you don't know Rahab, you can look it up, and we'll get into it another time.
I was going to say, she was there when the spies went into Canaan and all this other stuff. She housed them, and So, all right, well. Lead on, Pastor Tim. Do you want to jump up? The rest of the text was really Ruth chapter 2. Yeah, so we really can't go over the whole chapter.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we do find is that Ruth, they need to make a living. They need some kind of substance. And so it says here in verse 2, it says, "One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, 'Let me go out into the fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it.' And she said, 'All right, daughter, go ahead.' And so then she goes out and she finds this random field, and she starts harvesting. And you kind of mentioned this in your sermon. What does that look like?
So this tradition in that time was called gleaning, and you get that in the text a little bit, like she's asking to glean, and later on we actually get there's some workers of Boaz that are reporting to him that she's gleaned all day, with just a short break. So what it is they would, as they came in to harvest the field, they would leave the corners untouched for widows, for anybody that was just really on the bottom rung of society. They could come in and they could gather the plentiful harvest from the corners. And then the other thing they would do is, as the workers are going through the field, if they dropped something, they would leave it. So they would that intentionally, for those who were gleaning to come in and gather that up. So it was a welfare thing. It was a social welfare thing. It was a way of taking care of those at the bottom.
And what I find kind of amazing is that a lot of the things that you see in early Judaism, they actually are social benefits, social programs, and even kind of like the year of Jubilee, where land goes back to the original owner. It was kind of amazing how God put these safety nets built into the culture.
Well, I had a Sunday school teacher once that he taught a class on the ancient Israelite banking system, and he was like we should change to this now. Like he was a huge proponent. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff. The way they had it set up, in order to still allow for commerce and economy to grow, but at the same time take care of those who were, we would say at the bottom or on the outside.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and Joseph and I were kind of talking a little bit about like what does this look like today, just before we started this, and just that tension of okay, how much should we rely on the government to provide for us, and how much should we rely on people who have more means to help us out, and kind of the end result was we decided there's no good answer.
Well, not one that we know.
Right.
I think in general, I would say in general, I've done a lot of work in prisons. My wife and I were actually certified in Texas to go in and do like Bible studies, and we led worship services. And that definitely gave me a heart for people that we do tend to just kind of put in a box with a label on it and forget about them.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we do think of them, we tend to think of them as less than or not worthy of anything. They've made a mistake and they should pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
While it's true that we need those kind of systems in place in order to have consequences for our actions, any parent knows that with kids. I do have a heart that maybe sometimes our normal way in our culture, this thing of where we don't even think about them again, we don't even make any effort to really reach out. Or I don't know, maybe especially as a church, as Christians, you would think maybe, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's room to maybe consider a little more we could do for those at the bottom, those who, and maybe they've gotten there of their own designs, or maybe some stuff happened to them like what happened to Ruth and Naomi. I think there's room to consider how we could do a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And Jesus says there will always be the poor among you. So, when we start looking at it, there's no program or incentive process that we can do that will totally eliminate the poor. But how do we provide just a bare bones safety net for people who really are in need?
Yeah.
For example, like with Ruth here, the harvest only lasts about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And so here it sounds like a great deal, but this harvest, it's not going to last forever. And so how did they have to, take care of themselves? How did they have an income during these other times? Well, oftentimes, if you're a woman who's single and orphaned, or widowed, you would have to sell your body. And, it doesn't get to that point yet because there's the harvest going on now. But if it came to that point, that was the next thing to do.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but it is a reality. I think what we're seeing, though, in one of the things that we might be able to pull from, there's an actual ancient Hebraic term for this way that they're taking care of each other, and it's hesed, or sometimes pronounced kesed.
Love, kindness.
Yeah, kindness
compassion.
or love between people, specifically the devotional piety of people towards God, as well as embracing the mercy of God towards humanity, which I always really like. And I guess it's kind of what I'm getting at is to leave judgment to God and maybe come alongside Him with mercy and compassion, and not to take away natural consequences that need to be there, but nonetheless offer. I don't know about you, Tim, but to me, an avenue towards redemption and rehabilitation, and let's say leaving a life of talking about prisoners, leaving a life of criminality behind. I'm going to be able to go through that door when it has some hope at the light at the end of the tunnel. If it's total condemnation and shame, I can't. Personally, I'm not going to ever go through that door. I'm going to just be in that revolving loop. So, to consider this idea of hesed, of sort of like joining God in mercy. I mean, it's I don't know.
And then you start thinking, well, what does that even look like? In our world today, because Watershed Talks is basically, it's like, how do we explore the whole area of Clay County and beyond, and get to a point where we kind of consolidate that into what do we do here in this community? And so we've got places that give out food and some assistance and whatnot, but a lot of times it's not enough.
No, but I will tell you, I've been here about 4 years now, and I am surprised how sort of not maybe forgotten about or never known about some of these opportunities are. The flood knocked out one of my favorite, but the old hotel here in town. They're finding a way to come back, but for quite a long time, up until the flood, they did a community meal Monday nights and Thursday nights. 150 people a night.
Oh, that's incredible.
Just come and eat, no charge other than a free will donation, totally run by volunteers, a hodgepodge of volunteers of local churches and people that just feel called to help. Atlas in town is, again, they don't have a home right now because of the flood, but nonetheless, a wonderful organization that services those who are houseless in our area. And while Spencer isn't suffering from that as much as, say, Chicago, it still is. There still are those who are in a situation of not knowing where they're going to lay their head tonight, and plenty of opportunity to like volunteer and serve in those kind of ways. And, it's not being judgmental, but we all get into our routine.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost more that gets in the way of these kinds of things, but maybe something to think about, Hesed.
Yeah. Well, and, in my life, this is one area that I need to work on. And
okay.
I know that about myself because I have this idea of like a hard work mentality. If you are kind of down on your luck, if you pull yourself up. And I think that's kind of an American
Booker T.
cultural...
Washington.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly.
Yep.
and so I really wrestle with, okay, so I don't want to enable people, but at the same time, I want to be, kind and loving, because that's what Jesus teaches us to do, and balancing that. And then you start looking at all the other things like past trauma or mental health or things like that. And you kind of expand it. Well, there are some people who are homeless, who are hungry, and it's not their fault. It's just their situation, because if you have schizophrenia, bipolar, you can't hold down a job.
There's probably a Ruth and a Naomi walking around today.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That just due to circumstances outside of their control. Now, this is the first part of my sermon was about that. Nonetheless, Ruth did go to work, right?
Correct.
I kind of had a 1-2 punch this week, and the first punch, if you will, that may not be the best metaphor for a sermon, but it was the idea that, or one of the punches was the idea of needing to, in like Ruth's example, get out there early, go ahead and get to work, find what you can do. What I was thinking on that when I was first sharing it was, I was thinking more along the lines of like actually trying to find the love of your life. And
Correct.
Sometimes that's finding your spouse, like you're single and you're looking for, that relationship that'll be your partner in life. Sometimes you're married already, and the love just has waned.
It happens.
And you want to like re-find the love, even though you got the person.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And one of the things I heard a lot of was intentionality.
Yes. Yeah. Because, I think about, and I'm probably reflecting on times I've been in this place where that I feel that love is waned. I reference it sometimes as like a fire. You know, you've got times where the love fire between you and your significant other is roaring good. Other times it's a little candle, it seems like, you know. And how many times have I been in that place where it's dwindled, but all that's in my mind is what she should do different.
Correct. Yeah.
The list of things she needs to do different.
That was actually one of the thoughts I had when you were closing up your sermon. I was like, I wonder how many people here are listening to the sermon that you just did on relationships and being intentional and hardworking, and they're thinking, you know, I really wish my spouse would pay attention to this. You know, that I'm like, oh man, and I wanted to say something at the end of the service, but I'm like,
have you come up as like a hype pastor at the end?
Now, if you think that your spouse has work to do,
yes,
get a mirror.
But why do you think we do that? Because it's so common.
I
mean, that's why I put that in the sermon, because I'm convicted of when I've done that. You know, I've had times where I wish she were doing some things that were a little more like surprise, sweet things. And then I would reflect on how long has it been since I had her flowers delivered, you know? And the act of doing that, like, love is one of those things that you don't feel it unless you're also giving it.
Yeah.
You sit back arms crossed, it doesn't matter what they do. They can be doing everything in the book, you know? But if you're back arms crossed, are you going to feel that love? You have to give it to receive it, you know? But back to the question, why do you think why do we go to that? Like, your point, even in the sermon, even there might have been some that are like, yeah, I wish they would hear this.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, I mean, it's basic human nature. We are more inclined to look at the problems with others and to not notice what we're doing, and especially when we tend to focus on things that we really notice the things in other people that we need to fix in ourselves.
Right.
You know, so
splinter and log.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating though how we don't recognize that, and often I think the church hasn't even really taught on it enough. I think it's one of those things that it's sort of hard to explain, and it's really uncomfortable to truly receive, and so I think we kind of avoid it. I mean, I don't know if you feel that way, but I think we kind of could do a better job as a church and pastors, and just you know, when we get together to talk about these kinds of things, because it is really easy just to be like, yep, that's what they need to do.
Yeah. So there's a program that I teach. It's a marriage program, and there's little books that come along with it. One's for a man, one's for a female. And so the book that's for a man, it says, okay, so how do you make a marriage last? Well, you treat her like a truck. and at first it's like, I mean, that doesn't sound right.
That doesn't, no.
but then you start looking at it, and it's like, okay, you look at your manual, and it's like, okay, every 5,000 miles, I've got to get the oil change. And then, you know, every 50,000 miles, we're going to start looking at other things. And so there's regular maintenance that needs to happen. And, think about your truck. If you don't do that maintenance, something's going to go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much does this mirror our relationship with Christ?
Correct.
Because it's not, more often than not, I mean, okay, there are those of us struggling with full on dark sin, and that's gonna be its own problem. But there's also just those times in life where it's not that you're really struggling with that, but it's just how busy you are. It's just the routine of everything. You just don't get around to doing that maintenance. It takes that back seat. And how much does that mirror, whether it's with our spouse or with our kids, but also with God?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, have you ever found that hard work ethic you have actually gets in the way of your relationship with God?
Oh, for sure. And especially in the busy seasons of your life, like I know you're doing school, and I'm doing school, and so you get done with your church work, and then you go home and you do a couple hours of reading and writing, and it's like, where's the time for each other?
Mm-hmm. And I think that was the other sort of punch in my sermon, was just, and it almost sound. I mean, I kind of laughed at myself because I wondered if it sounded as contradicting out there as it did to me. But basically, what I drew it back to was that that we need to be intentional, and we need to put in the work at times, and not sit back and just judge and wait on the other. But none of that's going to do any good if we don't have the relationship with Christ in the right spot.
Yeah.
The first verse that you read to me, Ruth is showing a willingness to have a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And even though she didn't really know Yahweh, she didn't have a relationship with God yet, she did with Naomi. And something in her told her, follow Naomi, put Naomi's ness in charge.
Yeah.
And what she was doing, whether she even realized it or not, was putting God in charge.
Mm-hmm.
I asked it like, many of us will say that Christ is Savior, but is He Lord?
Mm-hmm.
And I realize for myself that I've done that. I've been working so hard, taking care of so many people and things, that I'm actually left Christ out altogether.
Oh, and it's so easy, and I think this is one of those things that people think that pastors, that we are religious or faithful people all the time, and we're praying, and we're sometimes being a pastor is about just doing the regular work of the church, and and
getting the bulletin done.
Exactly. and there's a lot of business that goes into it, but in all that regular work, it's really easy to leave God out, leave Jesus out. And I think that's true with any occupation, any kind of relationship that you have. Could you share a little bit more? You had the vertical and horizontal, and I thought that was really interesting in your sermon.
Yeah, so it's just a simple visual. You think about, we're supposed to have a vertical relationship between us and God, and then we have a horizontal relationship between us and everybody else. You could include creation in that, but so if you... what I was sharing is that I feel convicted in that I have spent a lot of time on the horizontal relationships. I have worked really hard over the last few years. Part of that has been doing school to, be able to be more prepared as a pastor. Part of that has just been the ongoing list of people to visit and talk to and take care of this and go over there. Some of that is, taking care of family stuff, all good things, none of it bad. But when our vertical relationship is off, then it doesn't matter how much effort we put into our horizontal. And again, this is where my sermon's a little contradicting, because what I am saying is we need to put in effort and conscious choices into our horizontal relationships. But we got to put in the right kind. And what I realized looking back over the last few years that I've done is I just put like Joseph's abilities and Joseph doing everything, and really Christ was like left out a lot. I mean, really, if I'm honest, not lack of belief, not doubt of existence, not total walking awayness, but just busyness.
Yeah. And how often does any Christian basically go out and do what they feel like they're supposed to do, and then afterward, hey, God, please bless this.
Yeah.
We really, God, Jesus has to be first.
Would you read, it's going to be chapter 2, verse 10.
Okay. It says, Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. What have I done to deserve such kindness, she asked. I'm only a foreigner.
So in some translations, it says, what have I done to find favor in your eyes, or to take notice? And one of the things that I remember is, from like the flood story, if you remember when when the rain is over and we're into like the next chapter, the first verse, God remembers Noah and his family, right? Which is like, I mean, I doubt God really forgot him,
Yeah.
But have you ever had that moment with your wife or anybody where you could tell they just noticed you? They just like noticed. You just felt noticed. Does that make sense?
I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, when they put down the phone, turn off the TV, everything gets quiet, and you just have a conversation.
Yeah. And I think about, as much as I'm longing for that and not to say it doesn't happen, but just with the busyness of life and stuff, I long for that with my kids, with my wife. I'm sure I guarantee you they would say they long for it from me with how busy I am.
The kids probably wouldn't admit it.
Yes.
But yeah.
But Christ is longing for that with us too.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think we forget that.
Yeah.
Even though Christ doesn't like need our undivided attention for him to be okay. He's not in a codependent relationship with us, right? But don't you think he's longing for our attention though? Don't you think he's longing for us to notice that he's there too?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That just speaks to me.
Oh, yeah, and for sure, because you think about that situation I said with my wife. Okay, so put down your phone, turn off the TV, and have a conversation. When was the last time that you intentionally took time, get on your knees, and to pray?
Yeah.
And you're not wanting anything. There's no medical emergency. When was the last time?
Amen.
Yeah.
I find that I can do it best when I get out in nature and I go on a walk. Sometimes I can grab a journal and I can actually journal out a prayer, which is helpful. But is it every day? Is it every morning? I think when you're around people that do have that, and as a pastor, I know I should, you can feel it.
Oh, you can.
It is, there's a stillness and a stability there. And so, yeah, preaching to myself this week.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we always have today to do it again. But that was probably the last main thing from the text of this week that just stuck out to me, was the idea of, Ruth felt so appreciative to be noticed. And yeah, it was partly due to her efforts. It was partly due to her reputation. It was partly due to that good character you talked about that she had. But
could also have been the smell. She's working 12 hours a day,
right? Yeah, might
plus
have
some.
been that. Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, just just imagining that vertical and horizontal. The graphic in my mind, it looks like a cross, and you've got God on top. You've got others to the side, but instead of me being in the center, I'm going to allow myself to surrender and move down and let Christ be in the center. And then it just connects us all. I've heard marriage counselors talk about, if you're both moving towards God, you're getting closer together.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It's that kind of thing, So not any huge, deep epiphany.
Yeah.
But just maybe a reminder that we need.
Yeah.
So I always asked him, what do you think is a way for us to go out and practice this week, what we're learning from Ruth?
Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the truck metaphor, okay? So if you are married, treat her like a truck. When was the last time you got flowers? When was the last time you actually sat down and had a conversation or went on a date or anything like that? And then we translate that also to God. When was the last time that you took intentional time to be present before God, to open up your Bible, to read? And, any kind of marriage where you're doing that daily, it's going to be much stronger. And the same is true with our faith. When we're doing it daily, it's going to be stronger.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you this one, but the woman's version says, treat him like a dog. And I know that sounds weird. That sounds really bad.
Okay.
But the idea is, with a dog, you give them affection, you show them love, and there's whenever a dog comes up to you, it's like, oh yeah, you get excited, and that's men. We want to be appreciated. We want to be we want to be part of your life, and just to have that attention.
100%. Yeah, I was actually going to say, figure out what his flowers are.
Oh yeah.
Whatever it would be for him, and by the way, for those who out there are not maybe in a relationship, due to just life and different things, and maybe that's just, I mean, I don't want to come across that like being in marriage and in a romantic relationship is the only way to be.
Exactly.
We can draw from this text the need, number one, no matter what our relationship status is, that relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
What are God's flowers?
Yeah.
Probably just going on a walk with him, just taking that time. But then too, if you do feel that you're wanting an actual human to express that compassion for, that kind of consideration, to treat like a dog.
I know it sounds so
back to where we started. I mean, all these opportunities in town.
Yeah.
I'm sure UDMO has things that they could tell you. Like I said, the Grand Avenue Outreach is looking for new places to be. There's churches all over. Atlas. I mean, there is plenty of opportunity in this town to go out and take care. And I mean, you can even do it with just the kindness of strangers. I mean, there's I'm sure there's a way to, I guess I'm just coming back to the flowers, where we could find a way to give each other some flowers, whatever that would be, right?
Well, and you're talking about single people, and I think in some ways this conversation applies more to single people than it does married people, because if you're looking for your Boaz or your Ruth, then you want a person who's going to be intentional. And so if they're not doing it while you're dating or while you're friends, they're definitely not going to do it when you're married.
Right.
And so trying to find that person with a good quality, that loyalty, it's important.
I guess I would just like to close with encouraging anyone out there to look out into our community, look out into relationships you have, look out into this area. There's so many opportunities. We do live in a special place, and there is a way to take the gospel here into Spencer, Clay County, whatever you want to call it. But you might do that by just starting at home with your spouse, with your kids, trying out some of these things. You might do it just starting with God. But I don't know. I want to encourage to keep at it, and I believe God and the Spirit will take you even beyond the home into this
right.
area. So
yeah, intentional, hardworking, Christ-centered,
Christ love-centered. Something. We'll get it one day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah. Have a good day.